So the book that we decided to use as our group project was called Network Advantage: How to Unlock Value from Your Alliances and Partnerships. And the group was comprised of Chase Collins, Kyle Folsom, Justin Neal, and myself, John Linebaugh. And just as an introduction, the book basically it has a couple case studies as well as a lot of deep dive into some different principles as far as the way businesses are set up and how the network is formed between different groups, whether it's supply chain, and how even the smaller networks can kind of take on a life of their own. It was basically built around the 6 key principles of network advantage. And the first was being discussed was the power that an alliance can bring. I think that's pretty much self-explanatory, but the key is that this information is transferred, cooperation between these relationships, and the power that that can achieve with a real strong alliance between different partners. I know from just my background that you can definitely tell the companies that have strong partnerships and how it can definitely help both businesses out. The second principle kind of tags on to the first one. So basically, there has to be an even distribution between the alliances of information, cooperation, and power. The third being they should be treated, these alliance portfolios as they develop should be treated as a living document, and then they should be managed with flexibility in mind. So you don't want to basically corral your alliance portfolio into a one-size-fits-all for everybody. There has to be some flexibility there. Another concept that was mentioned is the first, second, and third degree perspectives. And so this will be touched upon a little bit further, but just as a high-level introduction, it's basically the first degree perspective is the closest network picture that you can view, and then as you zoom out, that would be the second degree perspective, and then finally your third degree perspective would be looking at your entire network across multiple businesses, and what the principle says is that you should be comfortable of the different dependencies and how everything is kind of interconnected with each other. So you should kind of be a master of your own business network. The fifth principle is the network advantage growth is directly tied to how an organization is positioned within their network alliance. And what's pretty much self-explanatory. And then finally, the sixth principle is the internal coordination of network alliances. It needs to happen. So basically, when a small group of people determine network alliances without actively engaging the stakeholders, it's kind of a not a good business mindset. So you want to have transparency to the point of that's not detrimental to the business, but you also want to be inclusive and get other people's perspectives to kind of set the organization's network alliance. As the chapters 2 and 3, as the book got in more in detail around the case studies, they had 2 case studies that they referred to. The first one being the stealth bomber program. So the whole reason behind highlighting the stealth bomber program was really they went through a deal back in the 1940s where they had developed the technology and they weren't making a whole lot of progress. They were kind of consuming the entire budget, and they had a very limited network that was working on these different areas of this pretty elaborate and sophisticated aircraft. So what they were showing was that they weren't making much progress. They went over into it took to the 1970s when they kind of rehashed it. And then what they did was they spread those alliances out, and they went and brought in some smaller partners and smaller firms to do some of the detail work, and they showed the intricacies between the workings of these smaller groups in with the larger companies and stuff. It's pretty interesting case study. And then finally, the finished product was what they expected, but it was just took an iteration of 30 years in order to achieve that. The next case study was Samsung versus Sony, and it was essentially kind of what Sony wasn't doing right. So Sony was they were placing their business model was limited. They were very much not inclusive of other businesses and other mindsets. Where Samsung had, I think at one point they had like 33 smaller partners that they were researching, and they were working on certain areas of their business. But ultimately, it was a compare and contrast of two different organizations that were within the same ecosystem as far as what they were both producing.
The first degree perspective is a mindset and practice that is useful in determining appropriate alliances and partnerships. This mindset focuses on the evaluation of the two or more companies and how they would work together. The 4 dimensions of fit is an extremely useful framework when evaluating an alliance or partnership and analyzing the effectiveness of the relationship. The first stage is the strategy fit, which is the idea that the company should collaborate and that the relationship should be beneficial for all parties involved in reaching their goals. The second stage is the resource fit, which is the idea that all parties involved should bring unique and beneficial resources to the table. The third stage is the organizational fit. This idea considers the management at hand and how they should be similar in nature and decision making. In simple terms, the way the management controls the company should be alike. The fourth stage is the culture fit, which is the most common and important fit in my opinion. This is the idea that the companies involved should have similar ideas and beliefs. I believe this is the most important stage because it can easily make or break a company. Lastly, the framework suggests a reflection stage, which weighs all factors and determines the fit to be adequate or not. A chart can be seen on the slide that shows the flow. The second degree perspective is a mindset that is useful in understanding the alliances, the partnerships, and most importantly, the different portfolios and types of alliances and partnerships. The first one is the hub and spoke alliance. This alliance, which can be seen on the slide, is an alliance that has an open tie relationship with the companies that it's involved with. What that means is that the firm's partners or alliances aren't connected to one another, and their benefits only go one way back and forth with each other. Their partners do not benefit from each other. The second type is the integrated alliance. This alliance has closed ties, which is essentially the opposite of the hub and spoke. In this type of alliance, the partners can interact with each other and they can benefit from one another as well. This often leads to mergers from companies, but it doesn't always happen that way. Lastly, there is the hybrid alliance, which, as you may be able to expect, is a mixture of the hub and spoke and the integrated alliance. It has closed ties and open ties, so to speak. This is nice because it allows companies to customize the portfolio by adding or dropping different types of ties. This is a very common practice. A lot of big brands such as Samsung, Sony, etc. Do use this type of alliance. Now that we've discussed the first degree perspective, which assists with determining appropriate alliances and partnerships through self-evaluation and the evaluation of others, and we've looked at the second degree perspective, which analyzes the different types of portfolios and assists in choosing which one would be most beneficial to your organization, let's look at the evaluation stage, which is referred to as evaluating and changing your alliance portfolio. In this step, it allows an organization to analyze itself and determine if their alliances and their relationships and their portfolio is optimal. And then it allows them to change that, which is done through altering your open or closed ties, as mentioned previously. The first step to do this is to analyze your company. You'd want to start by using the chart that's on the slide The chart explains that you want to draw your portfolio, then count and analyze open and closed ties. Then after that, you want to draw and analyze your CAT. Then you want to develop portfolio adjustment plan and then reflect on your results. So how this is done is you're going to analyze the results that you've gotten. You want to use the 4 dimensions of fit as mentioned in the first degree perspective, which is strategy, resource, organization, and culture. Through this, your company is able to adjust their portfolio by adding or closing the closed ties. And just a couple examples that I mentioned on the previous slide with Sony and Samsung. Sony currently has 75% closed ties, while Samsung only has 56% of closed ties. So there isn't a set standard that is ideal across an industry. It depends on the company, what they're looking to get out of their alliances and partnerships, and what's going to be most beneficial.
The third degree perspective evaluates a firm's status and the status of the companies in its network. Status is a firm's perceived ability to influence industry trends and its perception as a leader in the firm's industry. There are 2 types of status. Operational status, which is based off of a company's ability to provide a high quality good or service, and its reputation for being able to do so consistently, and the brand that's behind the firm. Network status is based off of the status of the other companies in the firm's network and the outcomes of those alliances. So whether they're successful, whether the firms work well together, things of that nature. Status is different from a company's brand because it is influenced by the status of other firms in the network, and it's used to rank companies. So one firm having more status than another is you can easily kind of define that, as opposed to brand. They're just different things. A company's status is diminished if it partners with a company that has a negative perception. So you have to be careful about the company that you keep. The book provides an example of Apple and Foxconn. After bad working conditions were discovered at Foxconn, Apple's perception took a hit and its kind of status fell, so much so that it decided that it needed to kind of create a public relations campaign signaling that they were working to make the conditions better with their partner. The advantages behind having a high status with a firm include the ability to be able to gather more information from the partners because they're more willing to disclose things to their high status partners, and the ability for that company to disseminate the information on its activities without really paying for PR or advertising, because everyone wants to know what the higher status companies are doing. High status companies are also able to attract better alliance partners. Everyone wants to work with them to try and get things resolved, and then they're also more likely to get what they're asking for when they're at the negotiating table. They have more power than some other firms would. After understanding that status is an important thing for a company to have, and the more status that a company has, it's better off. It's important to know, okay, so where is my company in in its industry? What kind of status does it have? And then how does a company increase their status and be able to attract those better network partners? So the book provides a tool that's listed here as figure 7.1. The first step is to identify higher status firms within the industry. So if you're in the tech industry, specifically doing things like making phones and stuff like that, you would say Apple is a high status firm. Microsoft is less of a high status firm than Apple is with regards to mobile technology, and Google is somewhere in there as well. And then after you've kind of identified the high status firms, maybe the top 10, then you would try and position yourself as a firm. So if you're Google and you're trying to determine where you fit in there with regards to the mobile phone applications, then you would kind of say, okay, maybe we're 2, maybe we're 1. And then from there, you would say, okay, what do we need to do to enhance or sustain our current status? And then after that, you reflect on the next steps that need to be taken for the company to have that outcome. There are several different strategies to gain status. They're all based off of PR strategies. The first is to take a leadership role in any industry events. So if there is a large conference, getting your management team involved in putting that conference on, because the perception is that people who are involved in creating an event and are on stage have higher status than other people who were not involved in that process. The next is to communicate strategy on a critical industry issue, and that's find an issue within the industry that you're in and look for kind of a way to communicate what you're doing to try and solve that problem. And then the next one is to kind of create an industry event of your own. Invite high status firms to come and give talks. If you're the one putting it on, you get the ability to kind of say, presented by my company. And then announce small wins with your alliance partners. So if you've gotten an alliance, everyone likes to, the book says, everyone likes to put out, hey, we have this alliance. But if it then fails, then you've got egg on your face. Allowing firms to kind of say, okay, so we were able to win our first contract together or something like that. It's a small win, and it boosts the confidence of everyone else around you. See, hey, this firm is doing well in this alliance. And then finally, become a thought leader on either creating alliances or another issue that's relevant to the company. And that involves kind of meeting with journalists, meeting with academics to kind of talk about the issues that are being faced within the firm and within the industry, and allowing people to kind of talk about what's going on. It's free press for the firm. After looking at the first, second, and third degree perspectives of a firm, then it's time to design a strategy for the firm's alliances. The question is, should a firm build an alliance portfolio out of scratch, or should it maybe join an existing alliance portfolio and become a part of that group? The way that the book suggests doing that is based off of an assessment of the company's autonomy and its attractiveness. The autonomy is kind of based out of two parts, and that's uniqueness. So how unique is the specific product or service that the firm provides? Are there a lot of competitors? Those are the questions about uniqueness that the book provides. And then the other part is is the firm maybe a broker of information, or does it deal with a lot of customer information? Is it able to provide value to its alliance partners with information, as opposed to being one out of a small number? The other part of the assessment is the firm's attractiveness, and this is based off of how high is its status. If it's a really high status company, it's a very attractive partner. And then also its vision for the portfolio it has. So if it knows exactly what it wants to do, but it's maybe not exactly a really high status partner, but it has a clear goal in mind for the alliance network, saying, okay, we're going to do this specific thing, and this is what we're going to do, and I need these partners, and here's how you fit into it. And that also can provide a level of attractiveness that can work into it. So we want to evaluate those two kind of things, autonomy and attractiveness, and we want to take a look at the matrix that's provided here, figure 8.2. And that helps a company determine, okay, if I've got high autonomy and attractiveness, I can go on and I can build my own network. That would be the best thing. And if I don't have a high attractiveness, maybe I need to work on improving that first before I do anything else. And then if my autonomy may be low, but my attractiveness is high, I can join an existing portfolio network. So then once the firm has decided, okay, we're going to build an alliance, then we need to refer back to the three different configurations of a portfolio that was provided and determine which is the best one for my company to create. And then when doing that, it's important to make sure that the company is choosing its initial partners very carefully. Because as we've mentioned previously, you are the company that you keep to a certain extent, and if you choose negative partners, that is going to affect your own status. And then joining an existing alliance, if that's going to be the route that the firm needs to take, then it's important to make sure that you look for a good fit between the different firms and the alliance as a whole. So what is the alliance doing? Does it make sense for my company to join the alliance? And then also, do the companies within the alliance work well together? That's the network effectiveness that it's important to kind of determine. Does this alliance portfolio that I'm allying myself with work well together, or is it kind of dysfunctional? If it's dysfunctional, then as an alliance portfolio, it probably wouldn't be a good bet. And then it's important to make sure that before everyone's working together and everyone's getting along and they're doing the thing that the alliance is supposed to do, that an exit strategy is planned. So that involves the managers sitting down and kind of hashing out, okay, what is going to happen if we are able to accomplish our goals and the alliance portfolio does what it's supposed to do? Does the alliance end at that point? Do we find another goal for it to accomplish? Who owns what in this alliance, and where does property go in a situation where the alliance has to disband for a number of different reasons? And it could be that everything is completed and the alliance has done its job. That could be the alliance maybe has failed at what it was supposed to do. There were specific goals that were on a timeline, and the alliance has failed to meet those goals, and so the alliance is disbanded. Or a situation where the firms are no longer able to work in the alliance, and it is to a point now where there's gridlock and nothing can get done, and so the alliance needs to be disbanded because it is not providing any value to any of the firms involved. All of that needs to be hashed out before getting involved with the other firm, and done by the management team, and then bringing in the lawyers to make sure that the contracts are correct and reflect what the management team negotiates. That helps build kind of better rapport between the firms if the managers go in first and then the legal teams come in after that.
So each alliance style has its advantages and disadvantages. For the hub and spoke portfolio style, the advantages are it is involved in all business-related activity. Therefore, the firm can simply look at its internal operations and transactions to gather information on its alliances. A disadvantage is that it is not the best fit in emerging markets. Emerging markets develop alliances around trust, so firms in these markets may view that being reliant on a single hub could make the firm more vulnerable to unethical actions. For integrated portfolio styles, its advantages are it creates a community-based environment which makes it more efficient at solving complex problems. It also is a style that creates trust between partners and thus is a better fit for emerging markets. A disadvantage, though, is that any one firm is not directly involved in all business-related activity, so it can be difficult to stay up to date on all necessary information. In order to gain second and third degree advantages, firms must organize internally. One way to do this is by creating an alliance management office whose responsibility is to institutionalize systems that leverage prior alliance management experience throughout the company. It is important to involve executives within these teams to ensure adequate investment from the firm. An alternative method is Alliance DNA, in which the firm embeds alliance management within its culture. A firm may choose this method because it believes its alliance network is too complex for a single team to be held responsible, and so it trains its managers on alliance management and creates an expectation that these managers actively communicate across business units to stay up to date on all alliance activity.
The Alliance Portfolio Jigsaw tool is a 4-step tool that can be used to gain second-degree network advantages. Step 1 is to picture overlapping alliances by selecting 3 or 4 key alliances, identifying your firm's current objectives for working with these partners, and also identifying the resources each partner currently has. Step 2 is to conceptualize opportunities. You need to think about projects or initiatives your firm could start if you combine the resources from your alliances. Figure 10.2 on the right-hand side of the slide is directly from the Network Advantage text. It provides a visual aid of how the overlapping circles of each partner represents an area of opportunity for your firm. Step 3 is to determine how to proceed, which depends on your firm's optimal portfolio configuration. Step 4 is to apply broadly by looking at complementary products, substitutes, new industry entrants, or even competitors to determine whether collaborating with them and an existing partner provides any areas of opportunity for your firm. The purpose of this book is to provide an overview of how to capture the 3 degrees of network advantage in order to maximize a firm's competitive advantage. There are 3 key actions that revolve around capturing network advantage, which are organization, communication, and cooperation. Firms must organize systems that identify the best partners and the best types of partnerships to create. They must communicate across all business units to collaborate internally, and partners must work together to ensure there are benefits to both ends of the alliance. If implemented effectively, a firm's alliances can be the key differentiation between itself and its competitors.